Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the module on strategic trade and trade facilitation, especially discussing on the protectionism theories and practices, where we are discussing now on lecture number 11, specifically to identify the theories, the classical theories to the neoclassical theories, who suggested number of theoretical based modeling to identify the issues which were actually very important in the present day's discussion as well. So, the today's class is on neoclassical trade theory, and we are on the third week of all the sessions. And on the third week, we are supposed to start with the foundation of the neoclassical trade theory is called standard trade model, where there are number of models under the neoclassical theory. So, let me discuss in detail. So, myself Dr. Pratap Singh Mohanty, faculty member in Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Now, since we are having a departure from the classical to the neoclassical and the neoclassical certainly relaxes number of assumptions which are quite unrealistic in the classical setups. Now, in the previous lecture, even in the earlier lecture, let me just recapitulate for a few minutes that they broadly discuss on full employment issues, they broadly discuss on no restrictions, they do not emphasize the role of public or the role of the government, and largely they believe on free market mechanism based on the situations. And there were a number of interpretations to identify complete specialization in trade. So, is it still valid in the neoclassical setup to be verified in detail? Now, in the neoclassical setup, we must start with the difference to the classical one. First and foremost important aspect of this particular theory is relaxing the assumptions and emphasizing one of the very realistic assumption of production function called increasing opportunity cost of production, where the production function exhibit a non-linearity structure. In reality, it is not at all exhibiting constant cost function throughout. So, there is the departure. Another departure from the classical is due to the fact that they said there will be a complete specialization, and therefore, one country will be producing one product in lieu of another product to be produced in another country. But this is not enough, this is fine, comparatively trade should take place based on these reasons, but there are gamut of other factors which are responsible for explaining the trade model. And especially in this neoclassical setup, one thing is very important, even if the prices, the relative prices between two countries are same, I am making it quote and unquote, even if they are same, but still trade is taking place or trade takes place because of differences in taste and preferences or differences in demand patterns if a country can able to produce the product which is similar to another one in terms of the market prices relatively, but the domestic country actually demands the products of another country largely. So, another country will be happy to export it, since we cannot able to support our domestic demand. Like this is basically explaining small country versus large country context. We will also discuss these things in these two modules on today, and and there are other aspects to it as well. We will explain steadily. So, relaxing assumptions are very important, as I mentioned, and we also discussed this slide earlier as well. Now, but still to re-emphasize, to recapitulate further for our potential demand for the course, we must actually understand what is going to be discussed in couple of other lectures. So, imitation lag hypothesis prescribed by Posner in 1961, Linder overlapping demand by Linder in 1961, again in the same year. The implying geese model we have already categorically explained, emphasizing the fact that how a flying geese on the sky can describe different setups. We discuss revealed systematic comparative advantage plus trade balance index. By combining these two together, we explain how a country can relatively take the advantage. This is emphasized during our comparative cost model in the previous week. Similarly, gravity model will take it forward for sure, where the geographic distance and the agglomeration effect are important for trade. Product cycle theory by Vernon is very famous, 1966. Krugman model will discuss in detail, emphasizing the scale economies and its trade. Similarly, reciprocal dumping model by Brander, strategic trade by Brander and Krugman also will be discussed in some of our other lectures. Now, let us compare what we have discussed in the previous class on dynamic theory. Is it actually part of the neoclassical setups? Dynamic theory of comparative advantage actually has given huge attention on the supply side of the story. So, where the supply as a function of so many factors, accordingly the quality the production function gets changed. So, therefore, the output of the products actually changed, and accordingly there are differences in the relative prices or differences in the taste and preferences. So, there are possibilities of trade, especially in these two lectures we will be discussing on factor endowment and their differences, which is largely part of supply side stories or cases. So, this is also related to specific determinants which actually affect output growth, and in turn emphasizing the comparative advantage. And dynamism here, because of the fact that they are not just in one time period, there are changes examined over time, and the effect of trade actually gets understood. So, dynamic comparative advantage might be caused by so many other factors, like as we discussed already, input role of inputs as emphasized by Jones, and investment flows or the friction of the flows of trade, transportation, information cost differences, knowledge across the borders, then also very importantly in the present days due to technological differences, monopolistically competitive markets which generate differentiated products as emphasized by Krugman's model, where the scale economy is being emphasized, will be discussed in detail. Now, then what is discussed largely on the standard trade model. The first premise, which is very realistic actually, not we should not simply say premise, rather we may say the features of this neoclassical production function or neoclassical trade theory, where the production function is is considered to be very realistically defined as called or as a function of increasing opportunity cost. So, therefore, they are exhibit diminishing returns to scale, which is very real and it is the eventual occurrence in almost all the production function. So, what do you mean by increasing opportunity cost? Opportunity cost we explained in our previous lecture in our previous week, where we discussed that the opportunity cost is the next best alternative cost which has been forgone. So, what is the exact implicit cost or explicit cost which have been forgone? The net cost are actually captured through opportunity cost. So, if a country actually produces one variety of product, then the country is supposed to forgive other I mean the resources which are useful for the production of this to other production. So, there are possibility of give up or opportunities which are not tapped or actually sacrificed. So, therefore, the cost of production of the present good is a function of the cost of the resources which have been utilized or not utilized for other purposes, or utilized for these purposes as a gains or as a trade off to other products which are not utilized. So, in short, nation must give up more and more of one commodity to release just enough resources to produce each additional unit of another community. So, increasing production possibility or the increasing cost per production possibilities, frontier when we assume the production function exhibit increasing opportunity cost. So, the production function or the PPF, production possibility frontier, which we discuss in general in the microeconomics syllabus or microeconomics paper, where it is not straight line, because every time if you want to add one variety of commodity, there exists diminishing returns due to increasing cost function. So, the distance, the extent of sacrifice in another axis gets declined. So, we can explain here in short by putting it like this, So, make equal distance everywhere to understand correctly. Now, this, now this. So, if we plot it, we will mark the difference. Look at this distance, this distance, this distance and this distance. So, this is certainly greater than that of the previous extent of change in another product. Let it be y, this let it be x. So, how much y actually we sacrifice to add 1 unit of extra of x. Okay. So, therefore, it is concave to the origin since it is attached with increasing opportunity cost of production. So, this is actually the foundation stone of the neoclassical framework. Okay. So, there might be number of questions on it, comparing classical to neoclassical, and how the trade models are actually interpreted and how strategies are actually derived. So, various I mean simply define the strategic trade as defined in the classical economy or as mentioned in the classical economist, or how it is actually explained in the neoclassical regime. So, let us explain it here once again. Let this be the production possibility frontier, the maximum possible production which is possible by utilizing all these resources, maybe labor and capital or all other resources to optimally allocating its resources to x and y, so that the optimum possibility of production is possible, and the boundary point if all the points are connected called production possibility frontier. So, this may be for nation 2, this may be for nation 1. Now, from this diagram we can easily infer one of the important aspect, that is look at the gaps as mentioned or highlighted by the arrows and the extent of change for every additional 20 units of x 7 to 90, the extent of change is actually increasing in nation 1, only because y more resources of y to be sacrificed in order to add the same variety of x, and this is largely due to law of diminishing returns. law of diminishing returns, which we discuss in microeconomics lectures. Now, similarly, from in nation 2 for we let assume that nation 2 wants to have more of y because their resources are more endowed towards y, whereas our resources are more endowed towards x. Maybe we have more endowment for x type of production. So, therefore, if nation 2 wants to add extra 20 every time, so nation 2 should give off the resources which were earlier allocated for x. So, now the extent of this is increasing, it is highlighted by the arrow. Even the gap can be marked here, okay. And no, the gap sorry, this is not the vertical distance, we need to talk about the horizontal distance because we are sacrificing x. So, this gap, this gap, this gap and this gap, okay. So, it is highlighted in the horizontal axis. So, this is the production possibility frontier PPF we are discussing, and the slope. What is the slope of each of the points, on the production possibility frontier? This is basically the rate of change between y and x. What do we mean by this? So, indirectly we are explaining the extent of resources which are useful for y. Now, we are diverting for extra unit of the production of x. So, basically we are sacrificing the x and in order to produce y and x, we are actually indirectly sacrificing delta k by delta L, different type of resources for if x is largely useful for production of x varieties and x is largely labor intensive, then accordingly we can present it, and our next slide will guide you differently. Now, in this slide, this is a diagram, 3-dimensional diagram, where this is labor, this is capital, this is simply a production function explained in a graph, and if both are dynamic, not fixed, both are changing, then how keeping only labor as capital is at 2 level, then its production increases like this with the change in labor. Similarly, at different level it gets changed. Now, if capital is fixed, then we can define differently and we can plot it in a 2-dimensional figure. So, and that one usually explained with the help of isoquants. These are the isoquants or the isoquants we usually discuss in our microeconomic syllabus. They are called equal quantities on all the places. The combination of labor and capital which should be allocated in such a manner that the best possible quantity of production should be generated by utilizing its resources effectively. So that the theory suggests that these are the isoquant which maps the best possible combination of labor and capital and gives a maximum output at that level. Now, here if the production function is k and L for x and k and L for y, here we can define constant returns to scale or the homogeneous of degree 1 to the constant return scale or which is homogeneous of degree 1 can be explained by like this. If we change by 1 unit of x, 1 unit of k and 1 unit of L, 1 unit is here, the total output will always change by 1 unit. So, the output grows at the same rate at the rate of both inputs. Similarly, when the constant returns to scale exhibited, average products and marginal products are also constant. So, or that is also called marginal rate of technical substitutions, which is basically rate of technical substitution basically delta k by delta L, okay, are also constant along the ray from the origin. So, there will be some places where the slope will be same. Slope is basically delta k by delta L, okay. Everywhere it is same if we start a ray from the origin. And why ray from the origin gives the same almost same one, same average product, marginal product, and also exhibiting constant returns to scale because of the fact that this gives a proportionate change, this side and this side. So, 2 by 1, 4 by 2 are actually same. Okay. So, what are the proportionate change in the factors of production which will give you the equal rate of change in the total output is very important to be discussed in the production function. Now, here we are saying the how to reach the least cost combination if you have both the products to be produced. So, one is for x marginal rate of technical substitution, which is basically the slope of delta k by delta L, and for y if they are attached with the minimum most ratio of cost function. So, if these two are equal and these two are equal, then we know from the microeconomics theory that we attain at the least cost combination of production. So, if y production is capital intensive to x, then relatively we are using more of k for y and less of k for L as against for x. So, these two difference, the intensiveness of a particular product can be understood. Now, these are the two axes by which we can understand here x and y. So, x utilizes x utilizes more of labor comparatively, where y, y products utilizes more of capital as a factor relatively higher as compared to x. If there will be any shift of the scale of production, we may land into another point. If again the ratio remains same, the MRTS remains same, we are also attending the least cost combinations. So, therefore, the slope are important. So, production function with increasing cost, which largely explained by especially in production possibility frontier PPF, we explain this with the help of marginal rate of transformation. In the production function, we say marginal rate of technical substitution between labor and capital, marginal rate of technical substitution between L and K, where here we are saying it is between x and y. In PPF, we say MRT. In PPF, we say marginal rate of marginal rate of transformation between x and y. So, marginal rate of transformation is also called opportunity cost. So, the slope is also called opportunity cost. So, the value of MRT is given by the slope of PPF, which I have already explained. Now, what else is required in the neoclassical setup? Another thing is very important to be explained, called the community level of engagement in the production function, especially for their demand. And it is not individual demand, how the total production is produced by the production unit are actually demanded by the community. So, these are explained similar to the argument we understood in microeconomics called indifference curve analysis. The combination of two commodities which give equal level of satisfaction to the consumer. If we plot all the consumers on aggregate, we will find a commodity indifference curve, which largely measure taste and preferences, and it usually gives characteristics of usually give the demand pattern. So, then what are the characteristics of commodity indifference curve? CIC, this should be like indifference curve, it should be downward sloping. I will explain it here. It should be downward sloping, it should be convex to the origin. No two indifference curve or the commodity indifference curve should intersect each other. Higher the indifference curve, higher the level of taste and preference or satisfaction. So, let us assume that these are the two level of community indifference curve we have in two countries, nation 1 and nation 2. We will discuss, use it in our diagram. So, we will simultaneously require CIC, community indifference curve, and supply curve, that is here for us it is PPF, production possibility frontier. Now, these two will determine the best possible level of equilibrium, and in the absence of trade. Absence of trade, a term is called autarky. Autarky, where there is no trade takes place, and we can define the domestic equilibrium situation. So, nation actually seek the highest possible indifference curve given its production constraints. So, always the nation or the community and its persons always wish to have landed in a higher possible basket of commodities given its production constant. We will discuss. So, this is let it be the place where both are merging at point A. This is the autarky point. Here this is for nation 1, this is for nation 2, this is called autarky A prime is the autarky point in nation 2. So, accordingly they have their different production. Now, another thing is important here, this nation 1 is more endowed with commodity X, where nation 2 is more endowed with commodity Y, or the factors which are responsible for production of each of the products. Now, given its endowment, the price the production of X and Y and its rate of substitution for its factors can determine the prices of those transformation. The MRT and its slope defines differently, and it defines as like the slope of the cost of production, cost of X and Y, and these X and Y can determine the exact clarity of production relatively. So, the relative differences are like this, mentioned here as the slope, and it is 1/4 as compared to just the difference. I mean basically this is Px by Py, price of X divided by price of Y. Okay. So, price relatively the price of X, we have already defined the slope of this one is called price of X and price of Y, and because the because X is more endowed in country 1. So, country 1 can able to produce more, and in the pre trade period or in the autarky situation. So, relative price of X will be lesser. If there are only 2 nations, so if it is 1/4 in country 1, so it should be 4/1 in country 2. This is called terms of trade as well, terms of trade of exchange between 2 commodities or between 2 countries. So, accordingly there are possibilities. At this moment we are defining their domestic demand, how much they consume and also produce. Let us open the market to the world and try to understand how the neoclassical production function explain things in a detailed manner. Now, so basically the slope of these two should be equal, and that will define the best possible allocation of resources and especially in the autarky point. Now, in order to have A or the autarky point defined, MRT, marginal rate of transformation should be equal to marginal rate of substitution between X and Y. This is X and Y, this is basically the supply side, this is basically the demand side, which are exhibited through the community indifference curve, and this is explained with the help of this one, and this is explained with the help of its cost function and cost function are reflected with these prices. So, ultimately both should be equated with the prices, because these prices or the relative difference between the prices or the ratio prices are actually important for the producer, is also important for the consumers. So, we must understand wherever the slope are similar or same, the equilibrium best equilibrium point defined at the autarky situation. So, we have already explained this. So, each nation should specialize accordingly based on their endowment and availability of resources and demand within the country. So, specialization will continue until relative prices equalize between the 2 nations. Once trade is opened up or trade takes place, so 2 countries nation 1 and nation 2 will try to exchange their product, and once there is different demand, reciprocal demand across different places, there will be more demand for the product. So, prices will rise, price of the product will rise, and relatively it will be equated between the 2 prices, and the specialization will be continued till that point only. Okay. So, what we have inferred out of this diagram, another one important features is specialization, complete versus incomplete specialization. We have a detailed session for this later on in our other week lectures, where there will be no corner solutions, because of the fact that 2 products are imperfectly substituted to each other, and those products are very much normal by assumptions, and that too the production function exhibit non-linearity. which is the assumption of the neoclassical setup. So, there will be no corner solution. So, there should not be no complete specialization or no complete production of x only or y 0. So, each country will try to produce some of their products. Now, here what we wanted to say, after trade, initial phase autarky situation is here. After trade, the relative price might rise due to reciprocal demand or demand in other countries. So, price level will rise. Now, when the price level increases, the country might redistribute that income to its domestic consumers, and which has helped them to have higher basket of other commodities as well. So, they will land in a higher point. So, it will be better for the countries. So, these are this can be explained for this is to here, this is to for initial phase to another phase. So, initial phase to another phase. So, both the countries will be benefited out of it. Okay. So, now so equilibrium relative commodity prices with trade equal to common relative prices, which I have already explained in the previous diagram. Let us move on to further discussion. We have already discussed that there is no complete specialization possible if both the countries are large enough to define their stake. And what we try to mention here is the following. If it is a small country nation, now if both are large country, then complete specialization is not possible given the assumption, given the realistic assumption I have already explained in the diagram. If the small country, then probably they do not have that much endowment. So, they cannot specialize in both the products. So, and they cannot even support the total production to another country. Under constant cost, complete specialization occurs. But large nations continue to produce both commodities even with trade. A small country could not satisfy the demand for the large nations. So, large country will continue to produce both, but in case of this still small country would get advantage by exchange at the price ratio and may not specialize, and large country take advantage by exchange as well as specialization. Large country will exchange their products to another country as well as they specialize, and these are I will discuss in detail in the next class, where how prices are actually equalized. There are possibilities. Price equalization theory will take off in Hexter-Holin model. There might be a possibility where the price ratio will be constant, okay, and will be similar in both the countries. Now, so the discussion once again for small country and large country, for your clarity, that small country is endowed with very less resources, cannot able to produce all the demand raised by the large country. So, small country may specialize in one product, whereas the large country has endowment of all the varieties. So, have the leverage in producing all the commodities. So, the small country may not specialize in all, but large country can take both, because large country has exchange value as well as specialization value, because large country has the resources more. So, we have already discussed classical so far, classical in detail. Then we are taking off the new here also this is mercantilism we discussed, this is classical in detail. Now, we are taking off the opportunity competitive cost advantage, but through opportunity cost principle, increasing opportunity cost principle. Had it been a fixed opportunity cost, PPF could have been straight line, and there will be complete specialization. Maybe it is for similar small country nation or small country cases, but in case increasing opportunity cost, which we have already described, PPF will be concave to the origin and there will be incomplete specialization, and both country will gain. So, that is all for this particular session, particular class. We will take it forward some of its discussion of the neoclassical framework to the Hexter-Holin model in the next class. With this, let me stop here. Thank you.